Hello, everybody. Welcome into Week 4 of the Rundown presented by Michigan ADAS. Brandon Worth, JT Scarpelli, the dynamic duo running duos today here. It's going to be a great episode, and we're at a great place to record this episode.
Yes, as you can see behind us, we're at Michigan ADAS Calibrations Glass, our proud sponsor for the Rundown, all 4 weeks so far, as well as throughout the summer. What they do here, auto glass. They can do it remote or on site, but they also specialize in, when you get that windshield removed, sometimes those cameras, those sensors and all that kind of get a little bit out of whack. So this is what they do. So they specialize in making sure all the safety features on your car still work even after you have to replace a windshield or something like that after an accident. So if you ever need a service like that, highly recommend Michigan ADAS Calibrations and Glass.
Absolutely. They've done great work with us, and they've been a proud sponsor with the show. It's only fitting that while we're in between weeks here of going to fields, that we might as well,
do a pit stop.
We wanted to do a pit stop.
We were just up in Reed City, so we're just making our way back down to Big Rapids now.
Slowly.
And this is where we come, right?
Yeah.
Northland Drive, just north of town, in between Big Rapids and Reed City. Let's go back to last Friday night, Brandon. A little bit of an interesting game. More interesting for me, a little less for you.
Oh, okay, fine. Well, it was a good football game for a half, right? It was 14-13. Reed City was winning that football game. And two big plays from Jack Deitch. Obviously, he was the leading rusher for Reed City, finishing with about 120 yards, 2 TDs. He had
Monster.
Really breakout game, and you talked about the speed, especially that you saw.
Real deal.
He's a quickster, right? So,
real deal.
I think the biggest thing was the composure. And, obviously the turnovers for Reed City was something that really prevented them from winning that game, especially in the second half, right? Big Rapids starts off. Kurt Wilbur with a pick 6 on the opening drive for the Coyote offense in that second half. Really tide shift of momentum, and Big Rapids was able to really run the ball, control the tempo, control the line of scrimmage. Saw Garrett Foster have a really big game. Cole really did what he had to, even used his legs a little bit on the read option to score a TD. And so the offense for Big Rapids looked very sharp. Reed City's defense, obviously, they look good at times, not the whole entire game. They got beat on a couple of reads, and assignment football, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Big Rapids did that a little bit better. Reed City didn't necessarily hold on to the football, and then Big Rapids made enough plays to win that game.
Yeah, it was weird because typically, historically, when we look at these Big Rapids Reed City games, Big Rapids offense hits a couple big plays in the first half, and then Reed City makes adjustments, and Big Rapids has really struggled in that second half. You had the total opposite.
Yeah.
Total flip.
180.
Big Rapids offense was consistent, just driving the field methodically and getting into the end zone. And a lot of kudos to Cole Heiss. There's been a lot of talk about the youngster, and his passing game is what most people expected coming into this season.
Right.
Because he's not as fast as a Strickler or a Venix, but it was his legs. He made some fantastic, just delayed reads on those options, allowed his running back to get hit, and then took that ball and broke right up the middle. I mean, he had that 20-yard touchdown. He had another 20-plus yard run, and then he had that 13-yard first down in the second half that was a big play. So Cole, an exceptional day. Garrett Foster, a monster night. It was very surprising with some of the, for lack of a better term, sloppiness for Reed City. You're not going to win a whole lot of games when you turn the ball over that much. But it started right on the get-go, right? It was the first 3 snaps of the game from Landon Jackson. Fumble. Big Rapids finally recovers. You just kind of clean some of that stuff up. Reed City plays clean football. It's a much different game. Even with the pick 6, it's still a much different game.
It really is. And Reed City's offense, the chunk plays really weren't there. I mean, credit to the Cardinal front. Those guys really played well in the box.
They did. Caden Schuberg in particular.
Caden Schuberg especially. I mean, you saw obviously a lot of those defensive linemen. The linebackers did a really good job tackling and forcing turnovers, right? Lazinski had one of those fumble recoveries, crucial momentum swing. But I think especially when you look at both of these teams, obviously going into games where they can both have the really true ability to bounce back here in Week 4, and we'll get to some of those games here in a minute. But, especially to recap, Nuego's a 3-0 football team. I mean, they've really made a 360 from a couple years ago. Back in 2018, 2019, they were threatening. They were getting up to that 5, and ever since, it's really kind of been a stagnant, trying to rebuild, finding the right guy. And sometimes you just got to knock on the door of a Hall of Famer to rebuild it. And I would love to have Coach Munger on the show. Maybe he's listening right now. Formal invitation to you, Coach Munger. You are glad to join us. We'd love to talk about the job that you've done through the first 3 games. I mean, they're a 3-0 football team after getting a really big win, and you're seeing especially with a couple of these teams. Central Montcalm is kind of rolling a little bit. They're starting to figure out their offense. We saw that in week 1. Now it's really kind of personified, with Emmett Ligman and those guys. They're able to find some receivers, and that offense is working, right? And so you got really good teams that we're battling with. Tri-County's a 3-0 football team right now. You look over as well at the white division. You obviously had Central Montcalm as mentioning. You have Kent City, powerhouse, that's been the one that's ran the conference. They're out to a good start as well. And so you're really seeing a lot of these teams really solidifying themselves in week 3, but still 6 weeks to go before we talk postseason, and there's still a lot that can go good and a lot wrong for any team, top or bottom.
Yeah, when we look at the standings for the Red, the CSA Red this week, if Big Rapids can pull it off against Chip Hills Friday night, they would be probably tied for first place because one of the other tied for first place teams, they're playing each other. Nuevo and Tri-County, they have to lose. So we're going to start to see a little more separation as everyone gets into conference play consistently now. We've had, even week 2, right, we had some non-conference games, including Big Rapids. Not many teams played in conference. So, both in the red and the white, we're going to start seeing a little bit of separation as this goes. And when it comes to Nuevo, it's a very impressive start for Coach Munger. The only thing that I'll say on that is that it's been a softer part of the schedule. These next 2 weeks are really a grindhouse for them. They have to play Tri-County, and then they got to play Reed City. So they got 2 really tough matchups coming up. We'll see if the Lions are for real, right? And after the next 2 weeks, and see if they're still in the hunt for the top of the CSA Red.
Yeah, not only that, going to Tri-County and to Reed City to make things even harder. But they've shown it through 3 weeks. We'll see it if they do it for the next 2. And especially kind of as we're going into some of these games of the week here, obviously there's going to be a couple big matchups, right? You mentioned Chip Hills going to Big Rapids. Tough place to play. Coach Palong's squad really getting after it offensively. Defensively, they've had a lot of struggles. Over 170 points given up this year. You can do the math at home. That's a lot to overcome for an offense that's going to have a lot of pressure on them. So you're going to have to make a lot of plays, right? Defensively, they're going to have to find something if they want to have a hope to upset the Cardinals. But then you obviously, Nuevo at Tri-County. I mean, you're looking at Nuevo. They're a gritty football team when you see it on paper, especially you see all these numbers coming in. You're seeing how they're winning these games. They're really just gritting and gritting and gritting. They're playing old-fashioned smash-mouth football. They can spread it around a little bit, but they're beating these teams almost more with their defense, like taking down an offense like Central Montcalm, taking down some of these teams early on in the season. Yeah, they are a little bit of these not necessarily as strong offensive teams, but they're doing it with their defense, and that's going to be something really interesting to watch against Coach Butler because he's had some great offenses, and he has a lot of speed on the outside each and every year.
That's right, yeah, and Nuevo prior to Coach Munger and even a little bit last year when he was getting his feet wet in that program, they may have been able to put together one side of the ball, right? But, I mean, they had, when Big Rapids went down in Nuevo last couple years ago, they had a really rough time on special teams.
Right.
They had a really rough time on blocking. It was just there's facets of their game that was missing that clearly a Hall of Fame coach like Coach Munger is going to put together and get them back on the field, and we're seeing the results of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Reed City is going to be in a well-anticipated game. I've actually, fortunately, been able to meet some of the Glen Lake players this summer. I won't necessarily go to the facet to say how, but they're a really good football team. And even with their conference schedule, the game they highlighted was week 4, right? Reed City, a team that has been to the postseason plenty of years. They're a powerhouse in D6. I mean, it's a D8 football team. Glen Lake is a D8 football team, right? They're a really good team. We saw it in 2020. They went to the state finals, and they've been a little bit up and down since then. Started off 3-0. Now they've gotten themselves in the top 10 here in Division 8. So really, now it's going to be a make-it-prove-it kind of game, especially when you're going to Alumni Field, to Reed City, a team that is very motivated to get back on track, and they don't have to leave that field. That's going to be a big emotional test for them.
Yeah, and Reed City's got a couple of those games too. They got a couple of the Coach Schenkel was talking about this a couple of weeks ago on the rundown. They have a couple of these games where they're actually playing down, but they're playing really strong opponents down, right? So they have Maple City, Glen Lake, but then the last final week of the season they're going. Well, Notre Dame is technically smaller too, I believe. Right?
And then as far as enrollment, they're in D5. They would be very similar, but as far as a general school size, it would be very comparable. but that's a really good football team in
That's
Week 5.
Fantastic football team who absolutely annihilated Detroit Catholic Central. But you also have in the final week, they got to go to Beale City, a smaller school. So Coach Schenkel, he's bit off quite a bit, and we know he's a little nervous about if he can chew it all. But the Coyotes are typically up for the task in something like that. The final game we have this week is Fremont heads to Grant. Grant very down this year. That's going to be a little bit of an interesting matchup just because Fremont has struggled mightily over the last 10 seasons or so. So with Grant being down, that could be a pretty close game.
Yeah. It's kind of a county rivalry that you never really, because obviously when you think of Grant, what's their rival? It's on M37 against Newaygo. But, I mean, you go a little bit farther the other direction, they're going to run into Fremont. And these are schools that have history, so obviously the schedule lines up. But it'll be interesting. Both teams off to probably, they would say, subpar starts, in the losing record column. I'm sure they'd want that change. So this is going to be really a motivating mental game, right? Where can these teams build their confidence going into the rest of their schedule? Starts with this game. So it'll be very interesting, the Packers and the Tigers. But, I mean, we're going to see some really good games here upcoming. Obviously, we can't wait for next week, even though the Week 4's football games are going to be great. We're going to be looking forward to Week 5, Week 6, Week 7, Week 8, and Week 9 because we are seeing kind of how this might shape up. And if it does, on paper, to some of the crazy things that could happen where we could be talking about a 4-way tie at the top of first for CSAA until we get to Week 9, I mean, we're going to probably have a lot of eyes watching the show because we'll break down the numbers, but obviously we can't necessarily say them as of yet. I mean, we have a lot of crazy scenarios looking at the conference this year, and I think that just goes to a testament for the entire conference, every coach, every team, for making this a competitive league because that just makes everything, the viewership, our broadcast, and the brand of football better.
Yeah, that's what you always want. Even as a baseball coach, that's what I always advocate for. I'm more than happy to help kids, shout out Post 98, help kids with the American Legion team. I'll take kids from all over. I got kids from Everett. I got kids from Reed City. I got kids from Newaygo. So to me, if we make baseball better in the area, it makes everything better. We heard Mike Seltzer say the exact same thing when he was on the rundown last week. If the conference is better, Big Rapids is better. If Big Rapids is better, they're going to win more postseason games. And we know, just based on the schedule, Coach Schenkel agrees with him on that.
I think he does agree with him on that, which, speaking of which, we haven't necessarily done this on the show here, but obviously with the dynamic duo, we wanted to make this a little bit special for you guys, so we expanded a little bit to the Highland. You just mentioned Everett, a team that really shocked some people early on in the season. They had one setback against Lake City, but a really good-looking football team. And they're going to be in a really good tussle here on Friday night.
Well, and fun fact for you, the number one passing quarterback in the state of Michigan right now is Aiden Anderson of Everett.
Yeah.
The number one receiver in the state of Michigan is Lucas Johnson of Everett. So this team is kind of loaded. They had a hiccup week 2 against Lake City. And what makes this week 3, or this week, sorry, I'm getting my weeks mixed up now.
It's a lot of weeks that we're dealing with here.
What makes this week interesting for them is they're playing Pine River, who historically they've traded blows with Pine River, but Pine River just beat Lake City. Yeah. Lake City beat Everett the prior week. So what's going to happen now, right? And then talking with Aiden Anderson, he's just saying, hey, week 2, we had a lot of guys who weren't necessarily prepared for the competition. They probably overlooked our opponent. Well, they came back out last week. They threw up a ton of points again. And boom, they're back in the win column. But this is a very competitive Everett football team. I really like some of these athletes that they have. Aiden Anderson, in my opinion, is one of the most interesting athletes in the area of all sports. Lucas Johnson's right there with him, a year older than him. But they even have Noah Vanderland. He's 9th in the state with receiving yards. But let's get specific on Aiden's passing yards. He has 813 passing yards already. I mean, this dude is chucking the ball. The next highest in the state is Grass Lake's quarterback with 744. Lucas Johnson's got almost 450 yards receiving already. These guys are scoring some points, so it makes for a really interesting matchup in a couple weeks when they take on Beale City as well, who's always kind of the king of the Highland. But the team this year in the Highland is McBain. The Ramblers just knocked off the Aggies. The Ramblers are looking good. So the Highland is also looking pretty interesting as a conference at whole. So you have the red, the white, and the Highlands, 3 very interesting conferences for high school football in this area.
For sure. I just had to make sure I added Aiden Anderson on my fantasy team. So
That's right.
Sorry for me looking down at my phone for a minute. But I think when you look at...
It's a shame he's still on the waiver.
Yeah, who didn't draft him? That's crazy. But I think when you look at the Highland, obviously Beale City, Reed City had already scrimmaged. They're going to play him in Week 9. McBain is a team that last year really made a run. Obviously, Coach of the Year candidate, especially over there. He's already in the conversation in Week 3. And so you look at where they're at, and you're saying, man, it's a shame that they played in Week 3 because you'd almost want the storybook to be undefeated. Let's go to Week 9. Let's settle it right before the postseason. Yeah. Not how the scheduling works. We wish it were that way. But I think when it comes down to the Highland, you look at especially, it's been very top-heavy for the last couple of years, right? You've seen McBain be there. They've especially been back to when I was in high school in my football years that were very limited, by the way, but they were from the stands. You saw McBain. You saw Beale City. They were near the top, right? And really, from there was, kind of battle of the other guys, exactly, right? So you had the Will Ferrells of the crew, right? The Mark Wahlbergs got it battling in the middle.
Yeah.
So there really is, it's a testament to that conference, too, of look at Everett. Obviously, Pine River's playing a lot more competitive than they have been 4 years from now, right? That is especially where they're at, and that's great to see, right? Because their conference is getting better. You got these other tough teams in the Jack Pine that are playing in these non-conference games against the Highland, too, where you got Beaverton, Everett, I believe, beaten Week 1.
Yep.
You got some of these other really good schools, and especially now that we're looking at it, I mean, you're looking at region, right, as well. Some of these other teams in other conferences at the Division 6, Division 7 level for some of these teams, and just the fact that the brand of football is getting better, especially for this area, I think it's amazing just to see the growth, the rise from the ashes as we were a couple years ago. And I think it's back to say, especially from the COVID years, we saw a little bit of different football. Now it feels like we're really back. This is true Friday Night Lights, and these teams are really getting after it.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. And speaking of that, that's going to lead us down the road quite a bit. So let's take a couple minutes here on the rundown and get super speculative.
Speculative?
Right? Because I did a couple breakdowns to try to see, okay, what if this happens? What if that happens, right? So the two teams in particular that I looked at were the two teams who just battled it out in a big game last Friday night.
Oh, boy.
So Big Rapids and Reed City. What do the playoff pictures look like for them when you look at historical playoff points? What gets you in the playoffs? What helps you host in the playoffs? And you have to keep in mind the way playoff points work, too, is the higher the division, the more points you have to have. So Reed City can get away with less playoff points than Big Rapids, and they will still host because they're in 2 divisions lower. So here's my thing.
Here we go.
If Big Rapids can win 5 of their last 6 games, so that involves 2 really big wins against either Tri-County, Newaygo, or Coopersville.
Correct.
So those are their 3 toughest games as we go through the end of the season. They will have an estimated about 48 playoff points. So 55 or more playoff points hosted in Region 1 in their division in 2023.
Correct.
So they're still pretty far away from hosting, even if they win 2 of those 3 games, 5 of their last 6 games of the season. If they lose to those 3 teams, there's a really good chance they don't make it. That would drop them below 40 points. 42.44 was the lowest in that division in 2023. So they need to continue to put the pressure on. They got to take care of the teams that they know they can beat, and they need to win at least 2 of those 3 games. If they can win all 3, there's a good shot that they can host. However, it's tough. In their division, it's really tough because you get a lot of these GR area schools.
Correct.
Right? They're playing big schools.
South Christian, Unity, even teams they saw last year.
Well, and they get to add on with Kanawha Hills and like big schools who aren't really that good. So they just get free playoff points just from playing that. We used to kind of have that, no offense to Fremont. We used to kind of have that in our conference too.
A little bit, yeah.
Fremont was a bigger school and everyone kind of beat up on them. So it was like free playoff points. But, ultimately, what also helps is, and this is what Schenkel's going for Reed City, playing really good teams. That's what the playoff point system is supposed to encourage. So you play really good teams. If they win, like Pawpaw right now, and I had Pawpaw estimated to finish at 8-1, that's going to help Big Rapids even though they lost.
Immensely.
So when we go to Reed City, assuming that, say, they lose 3 games this year, right? If they lose 3 games, if they win out here, then they're easily not only in the playoffs, they're hosting.
Easily.
Without a doubt.
Easily.
Because if they lose 3 games, they're probably still hosting.
Right.
So they can afford to lose to Maple City, Glen Lake, and Notre Dame, and they would still host because it would give them about 46 playoff points. 42 and more hosted in their region last year. So a much easier route for Reed City just because it's a smaller school. And they don't necessarily have to contend with a lot of the larger football programs in Grand Rapids, but they still got to take care of business. Both teams got to take care of business. And also, this could mean everything, but it could mean nothing because
we got what?
We're only in week 4.
6 weeks of football left.
We got 6 weeks of football, so we're only in week 4, and I'm talking about playoffs. It's kind of stupid, but it's fun to do. It's always fun to do.
Everybody loves when you're talking about speculation that won't make sense next week. Everybody loves it, right?
Well, every week is the biggest game of the year.
It really is.
Right?
For us, it is.
Yeah, but Reed City, Big Rapids, that's the game of the year, baby. Like, you can't get any better than that. And then now it's like, oh, wait. No, like this week is the biggest game of the year, right? And you just always keep moving forward, but it's always fun to speculate. So that's some of my little quick math on that, throwing that into a little Excel spreadsheet and seeing what happens with playoff points.
Yeah, let's just say me and JT are breaking down the playoff numbers. Jason and Mark are also going to be keeping tabs with us here across the way because they're just as interested in the nerdy stuff as we are. And so it's going to be really fun to see once we get to what-if scenarios, which will really kind of take shape Week 7, Week 8, Week 9, where teams are very solidified. And we know enough about the teams, we know the numbers, and what probabilities we're going to be talking about, where it'll be, we can speculate a game right now in Week 9. A lot can happen from now, Week 4, to Week 8, the week prior to. Injuries can happen, scheme changes can happen, anything can happen. So we're going to speculate, but I think it's fair to say in these scenarios, right, I think the area would love to see Reed City and Big Rapids both make a run like last year. I don't think there's any question about it. What it does for the towns, for us, we make a little bit more money, so we're biased, of course. But I think it just helps better. And now that we got these other teams in the CSAA that can make a little bit of a run, like Newaygo right now, when I check some of those projections, would technically be a 1 seed in their district right now. That's very exciting for a team that didn't make the playoffs last year, right? And that's really something that they can use as momentum. We still got 6 weeks to go, but when it comes down to it, the area is better when more teams are in the playoffs. And that's what we're going to be rooting for at the end of the day. It's a shame that these other teams are going to have to beat each other and lower those chances, but we got some really competitive football, and it's going to make things more interesting.
That's right, yeah. Looking forward to it. From the Highlands to the CSA White to the CSA Red. There's some good football going on. Like you mentioned, Newaygo, you got Tri-County's probably going to make a run. You got Central Montcalm can make a run. You got Beale City. You got Everett. You got McBain. There's a lot that can happen in this area. And then you never know. You never know. Chip Hills could catch fire. You never know.
You never know. You never know. I think Coach Pelong would love that. And we would love that, too, to see Chip Hills really turn it around. But we're going to have some great football on deck, guys. So make sure you subscribe. Big Rapids Daily News, WBRN on YouTube. Don't miss out on an episode. And before we go, we got to say thank you, especially. I would like the keys to that truck back there. It looks amazing. But big thanks to Michigan ADAS for making this possible. They do some great work. And if you really need anything calibrated, broken glass, come on over right off 19 Miles exit. You can get taken care of by the best, and we're glad they're along with the ride with us, especially as we get more nerdy. They will, too, to make sure that your vehicle's fixed up right.
Yeah, and keeps you and your family safe. They're a great company, and yes, we thank them for not only hosting us, but also sponsoring the show.
Absolutely. That's going to do it here for this Week 4 preview of The Rundown. Be sure to subscribe on BigRapidsDailyNews.com, and you can get all the scores on BigRapidsDailyNews.com each and every Saturday after Friday night is completed. That's going to do it for us. I think we've done this every time, but it's weird. We have to do the duo handshake because we don't have a guest on. So
yes.
I guess, do you want to run it back next week?
We could.
I guess we should.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time, guys.